All righty. Welcome, folks. We can see you watching in the comments here in the little box. This is Ariel Hunter. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator here at the Elkhorn Slough Reserve. And today I'm actually joined by the Reserve's Stewardship Coordinator, Andrea Woolfolk, who will be our speaker. Andrea is our Stewardship Coordinator, so that means that she's responsible for overseeing all of the restoration work that's done across the reserve's 1,700-ish acres. And that means that she has to know everything from the oak forest and oak woodlands habitat to grasslands to salt marsh, and even I think eelgrass beds are involved. So there's quite a breadth of habitats and knowledge that she has to have. And in addition to that, she is kind of our go-to local historian. And she knows a lot about what has shaped the reserve lands and the surrounding Elkhorn Slough watershed as a whole. So today she'll be talking about the Elkhorn Slough watershed and some of the early efforts to map that watershed and how we can use that in the realm of restoration. So Andrea, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Ariel, and hello, everyone. Let's see, there we go. All right, so we're going to jump in, and I want to say hi there. We're going to be taking a tour of our big watershed through a lens of some really old maps today. I'm guessing that most of you know this already, but as a refresher, our definition of a watershed is a land area that channels rainfall into streams and rivers, eventually to outflow points like estuaries, and finally the ocean. So Elkhorn Slough's watershed is pretty big. We're going to be looking at a lot of maps in the next 20 minutes. So let's start by all getting on the same page. What you're looking at right now is a nice aerial of the area with Moss Landing up here towards the top and Elkhorn Slough just above that. Towards the bottom of the screen, of course, is Monterey, and in the middle here is the city of Salinas. So for many years now, I've been mapping the historical extent of our watershed using hundreds of historical maps and historical primary documents to draw where the lakes, marshes, creeks, streams, and rivers connected to our estuaries in the area. And so I want to show you what that work looks like, what my resulting map looks like. And that's what you're looking at right here. So this is the colored things on here are a map of what our wetlands in North Monterey County look like in the 1700s and 1800s. And let me go through the color coding really quick. Up at the top, you see a lot of kind of olive greens and dark blues. Those were tidal, and still are in most cases, tidal areas. The green shows you tidal marshes, and the blue shows you tidal channels. So we had Elkhorn Slough at the top, Morro Coho in the middle, and you just barely make out Tembladero as being tidal down here towards the middle. All of these estuaries were connected by the Salinas River, which is coming in here from the south. And then back during this time period, at most of the year, the river would continue behind the sand dunes and connect up the mouths of Tembladero, Morro Coho, and Elkhorn Slough. So these were all connected by the river, and then they were in turn connected to this long chain of lakes that existed between today's Castroville and the city of Salinas. And you can see those in these blue colors, these cooler blue colors. So it was a very interconnected system of waterways and lakes, pretty impressive. So let's see. So understanding these past connections, oddly enough, helps us better understand the situation that we have today, understanding how things evolved and how they function relative to that today really can help us manage into the future. So this has been very important for my work as a land manager. So in order to create this map, as I mentioned before, I relied on a lot of old maps and historical documents to put together these puzzle pieces. And some of the maps that I used were very detailed and precise, like these two. So what you're looking at here on the left was a survey that was done for the newly installed railroad that went right through the middle of Elkhorn Slough. So this survey was done in the 1870s. Something like this really helps me put together those puzzle pieces of the map that I just showed you. And here's another beautiful survey that was done in the late 1800s for a landowner. This property survey shows me different habitat types and is super accurate. But it turns out that some of my favorite maps are actually older than this and much messier. They were hand-drawn maps of Mexican ranchos, mostly drawn in the 1830s, sometimes in the 1840s. So what were the ranchos? What were these Mexican ranchos? Going back to my base map here. During the Mexican period of California's history, which lasted between the 1820s and 1840s, private Mexican citizens could petition the government for large parcels or ranchos. Part of this petition to get your rancho was that you needed to submit a map of the land that you wanted. These were called diseños. And a lot of people in our area did get grants, and that's what this is showing you here. Each one of these kind of purplish pink polygons shows you a privately held rancho during this period of the 1820s through 1840s. And you can see most of the land in North Monterey County was granted, a few exceptions, right above Elkhorn Slough here, one here in the middle, but mostly the land did end up in ranchos. All right, so what I'd like to do for the rest of this talk is share with you some of my favorite rancho maps from that period. And it's going to be 4 ranchos to be exact. So the ones that I've got highlighted here in lighter pink. We're going to start in the very south here in the city of Salinas. And then we'll work our way a little to the west, cover those 2 ranchos, and then we'll end up in the rancho that includes a lot of the Elkhorn Slough Reserve here in the north. All right, and so as we go through these rancho maps, they're mostly in Spanish. My Spanish, unfortunately, is very bad, so I'll use a lot of English translations, but you'll be able to see the original maps. And Ariel really wanted me to make sure that I link these back to the world today. So I'm thinking we'll take an approach like this is a road trip. So we're going to take a road trip through both space and time. I've never tried to do anything quite like this before, so I hope you'll bear with me. But we're going to try to make the link between these really old rancho maps to Google Maps, Google Earth, and Street View images. All right, so this is a map showing you the same information before. Again, these the very colorful wetlands are my historical wetland map, and they're there for context to help you understand the pieces that went into building the map. And then we've got the 4 ranchos here outlined in pink. But I wanted you to see these superimposed over a map of today's highways so you understand the route that we're taking. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here on Highway 101 going through Salinas. Then we're going to cut over to Highway 183 that connects Salinas and Castroville. And then we'll cut over to Highway 1 for a short stretch. And then we're going to take a turn at the power plant, and we'll go up Dolan Road, and our very last stop will be here in the San Miguel Canyon. All right, so we're starting here in the middle of Salinas in the Sasal, I hope I'm saying that right, Sasal Rancho. You can see from my wetland map in here that they used to have several lakes and wetlands in it. So here we go, finally. We're looking at an actual rancho map. So remember, a private citizen had to draw a map of the land he wanted to have granted to him, and then he'd submit this map. So the Sasal Rancho, the map that you're looking at right now, was first granted to Jose Castro in 1834. So it may be that this map was drawn then. But there's a lot of English on this map too. I don't know if you can see this, but Tule Bottom coming through the middle of this map. And then there's the word hill here and boundary. So it's possible that this map is a little newer than 1834. Castro did sell off his land to Jacob Lease a couple of decades later. And Jacob Lease was married to General Vallejo's sister, if you're interested in those kinds of connections. But either way, this map is pretty old and it shows a lot of water. So before I show you any English translations, let's go through some of the waterways that are on here. So at the very bottom of this map with the lines going through it is a slough. I know it's a slough and a freshwater slough by where it's at, but the word San John means slough in Spanish. Some of the other things aren't labeled, but they're clearly lakes. So these funny shapes in the middle with the lines going through them are lakes or ponds. All right, I think with that, I'll go ahead and bring up the English. Oh, let's forget this. this map looks to be pretty darn accurate, even though it's kind of, even though it's very hand drawn. One thing that seems to be off is the north arrow. Actually, north should point off to this corner up here. All right, now we'll go to the English translations. So Sasal means willow. So this big ranch in the middle of Salinas was the Willow Ranch. It may have been named for this big willow grove that was right on the edge. It was named Los Gatos, so the cat's willows. The slough that I showed you at the bottom is Alisal Slough. That means alder slough. I've already shown you the Tule bottom, so that would have been freshwater marsh. But off to the sides, you can see some uplands. You can tell that they're a little raised above, and this one at the bottom with this very distinctive shape is a big pasture. Then there's another very distinctive shape at the top there, which was a little pasture next to some crops and a corral. And then just above the little house I've got drawn here were positas. I love this detail. There were little pools, little ponds. All right, so this is what it looked like in the Rancho days. What does that look like in Google Earth? Here's what we've got today. So some of the features are gone. You don't really see those lakes in the Tule bottom anymore, but the shape remains. So this large farm field in here is really the same shape as those lakes and marshes that we saw. But today they're farm fields. But you'll notice there's a lot of development all the way around it. And this has probably been retained as farm fields because it probably still floods frequently. It would have been hard to build homes there. But increasingly this area is the site of habitat restoration and park development too, which is a really neat development out there. You can still see the shape of that big, large pasture. It's no longer pasture, it's habitat for people like you and me now. And you can kind of make out what was probably the little pasture at the top. So because it's a road trip, I want to actually get onto the road. So what we'll do is we'll jump down onto Highway 101 here. And if we were in our car right here and then looking maybe a little bit to the southeast, this is what it looks like. So I've certainly driven by here lots of times myself. And what you're looking at when you drive this little piece of 101 are the former lakes and Tule wetlands as you go over those farm fields. And then that large pasture, you can see the hillside built up over there. You can see the homes there. In each one of these cases, I'll show you the original Rancho Map, and I'll show you kind of what we're looking at. So we're probably looking at this area of the map, and then there's that big, large pasture over there. Okay, so we just drove this little section of 101. Now we're going to take our road trip into Rincon de San Juan. And that means corner of the sloughs. So we're going to have to get off 101 and then approach this rancho, which is easy to drive through because the rancho is bisected by Highway 183. And this is one of my favorite rancho maps. I just love the colors on this, and it comes with this beautiful legend. I just love the style of this one. It's so pretty. Because there is a legend, it's really easy to put the translations on here. So let me put those up for you. What we're looking at in this pretty drawing is at the bottom on the south side here, it was a large slough, maybe with some wetlands around it, a little hard to know what the lighter blue is, and maybe some side creeks coming in. There's a second slough in the middle here attached to a lake on the north end here. The two sloughs were connected by little paths that are shown in these light brown lines. On the very north, there's the boundary line with maybe another lake right above it. I love that you can see the house right along the boundary. And then once again, we saw this in the other rancho that we looked at, but here's that big willow grove. It seems to have these trees drawn around some sort of wetland. Again, this would be the Los Gatos wetland grove. All right, so what does this look like today? Here it is, the same area on Google Earth, and it's pretty different today. Now it's mostly farm fields, very productive farm fields, probably a source of a lot of food that we get today. So we would be approaching on our road trip coming in from this road, and we would come onto this property, which is owned by the Monterey County Historical Society right here, and we would be able to visit the house that we saw. This is the Veranda Adobe, and here's its depiction on the map that we looked at just a couple of minutes ago. Pretty nice depiction. So we would pass by this adobe on our trip. And then as we got onto Highway 183, we actually could see the old sloughs. They're still there. They're pretty channelized, but they still exist. So you can see the curving lines of the smaller San Juan or slough here on the north. And on the south, this is where that larger slough would be. So on our road trip, let's hop down onto 183 and we'll look back to the south. And this is the vantage point. So from here, you would be able to see that large slough, which is shown in the inset right here. And what I really love about this particular shot is then you can see the turnoff to San John Road. It should be one word instead of two, but you could take this turnoff to go to the smaller San John or slough right here. All right, I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. All right, so let's continue on our trip. This time we'll go a little farther west and north. We're gonna go to the Bolsa Potrero y Moro Cojo Rancho. And so again, we'll stay on 183 to go through the back corner of this rancho. So let's take a look at the rancho map as it was drawn, probably in the 1830s or so. So Bolsa Potrero was really bounded on the top by the Tembladero Slough, shown here, and the Salinas River, which came in from the south and of course made that bend behind the sand dunes right here and then connected the two up. And you can just see the outline of Elkhorn Slough up here. On the east side, it was bounded by a road. So let me go ahead and put up our translations here. Let's start at the top. So Tembladera Slough actually means quaking ground. Apparently there's quite a few old accounts that, especially in this back area of Tembladero, the ground was very soft and would move as you would walk on top of it, as if there were wetland plants really over the top of water. So it was quaking ground. So you can see Tembladero there. Back during this time, the name Salinas River didn't exist. It was called the Monterey River, Rio de Monterey. One thing that I love is you can see, oh, I didn't tell you when it was granted. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Let me go back a little bit and give you a little background on this. It'll help understand what we're looking at. All right, so the Bolsa Potrero y Moro Cojo was granted to Joaquin de la Torre in 1822. He later sold off portions of his grant to an Irishman named John Mulligan or John Mulligan, and another part of the grant to John Cooper or Juan Cooper. Eventually, Cooper took ownership of the entire ranch. Okay, now this piece makes more sense. Here is John Mulligan's house. I love this little drawing of his house. If you know the area pretty well, you probably know that Mulligan's name lives on the name of this very large sand dune that you can still see at the Salinas River Lagoon. That's called Mulligan's Hill. So you can see his house there. You can see the path going from his house up to the north. And you can see a big San John or slough running through the middle of this rancho. There's some low hills documented. You can see the Royal Wagon Road on the east. And my little face here, one of my favorite details on this map is there's this peninsula in the back that they called the pocket of mice or rats. There were apparently some sort of rodents in some kind of great quantities that made people call it that. I just wish I knew what that was all about. Very interesting. But my very favorite detail on this particular rancho map is right here. It's the Lagunas de la Yerba Mansos. I'm probably mangling that word, but this plant name actually refers to this beautiful wetland plant that I'm not actually all that familiar with myself, but these beautiful flowers apparently would have been, must have been abundant around those lagoons. All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like today in Google Earth. Of course, the Salinas River still exists. It's straightened out quite a bit. You can see that big oxbow that showed up in the Rancho map. It's still evident, but it's not the course of the river anymore. There is still the old Salinas River channel that connects up to Tembladero Slough, which is kind of hard to see, but it runs behind Castroville, of course. The location of that old path is about where Highway 1 is today, which is very interesting. That old Camino Real that was at the very eastern edge is kind of a small ranch road. It's a Cooper Road, but the low hills are still there. So let's take our road trip through Let's take our road trip through this rancho. And what we'll do is we'll come in from the south on 183 and let's take a look at those low hills as they exist today. Oh, wrong way. There we go. And I like driving this road because as I drive through, I think about these old maps and you really can. There's that low hill right about here. And then the former lake bed that probably had those beautiful flowers is right here. So it's sad that the lagoon isn't there anymore. But again, it's productive cropland, so we benefit from it in other ways today. All right, now we're going to make the jaunt into our last rancho. This is the one where the reserve is today, or most of the reserve is on this today. This is Bolsa Nueva y Moro Coho. I'm going to get my stats for you. Here we go. All right. So Bolsa Nueva y Moro Coho was granted to Simeon Castro in 3 separate pieces. He got the first piece in the 1830s and he expanded it into the 1840s. But this is the complete one that we're looking at right now. So we're going to travel through this first by cutting over from 183 through Castroville to Highway 1. Once we get to the power plant, we'll go on to Dolan Road, and then we'll follow that up to part of San Miguel Canyon. All right, here we go. So this is the final Rancho map. He did submit 3 different maps as he got new pieces of it, but this is the final one. Of course, this Rancho map includes our estuaries. So Elkhorn Slough is at the top. Moro Coho is in the middle. An offshoot of Moro Coho is the Castroville Slough. So that's shown right here. You can see Tembladera. I don't know when it changed from Tembladera with an A to Tembladero, but they used to call it Tembladera. And that's labeled as an estero down here too. You can see the river, the Salinas River, connecting them too, and they have a shared mouth to the ocean over here. This final rancho extended pretty far to the east, so it included the Chamoisal or Chaparral Hills in the east, and of course included Cañada de San Miguel or San Miguel Canyon. So let's go ahead and put up the English translations. So the estuaries, of course. The land, again, like I was showing you in other places, referred to as bolsas, as pockets. So there's several, they labeled the different pockets with specific names. At the mouth of Moro Coho, there was a big salt pond. And then I guess I want to point out a few of my favorite details on this. On the land that is part of the Elkhorn Slough today, all those little peninsulas that jut into the wetland, you know, around where we have Five Fingers Loop Trail, they were bolsitas or little pockets. I love that detail. At the very terminal end of Tembladero Slough, which ended up in a large freshwater area called Merritt Lake a little bit later, in this land that juts into Merritt Lake, there was the deer pocket. So again, what did that look like? Were those deer? Were those tule elk? I just wish I knew a little bit more. You can see their house here at the bottom of San Miguel Canyon. But what I love in San Miguel Canyon is if you look closely, you can see these funny little shapes drawn throughout it. Those represent ponds or lakes that were in San Miguel Canyon. So pretty detailed, beautiful map. All right, so this is what the area looks like today. Let's put some labels on it. So of course there's Elkhorn Slough at the top, Moro Coho in the middle, and you can just barely make out part of Castroville Slough down there. Tembladero, hard to see in this map, but of course running right behind Castroville. The river's still there. It's diminished in size, but it's still there. The Deer Pocket actually would have existed kind of south of the Oak Hills development between 156 and 101 back here. And of course, San Miguel Canyon is a major thoroughfare for us today. All right, so let's do our road trip. We'll come in from the south, starting on 183. So what would you see if we were there? One of the first things you would do is you would cross over the Tembladero Slough, which is nicely labeled for us on this bridge. It's surrounded by farm fields on both sides, but the Tembladero Slough is definitely still there today. So that would be here on our map. Then let's cut over to Highway 1. Let's go over the Castroville Slough there. And you would know that when you're on Highway 1 and you pass this big Moss Landing sign with the guy in the boat right there. It's really telltale because of the wetland enhancement that's been done there. I think Moss Landing Marine Labs worked on that in conjunction with PG&E, but you can see a lot of like willows and wetland plants in there, and that's Castroville Slough. So that would be on this part of the old Rancho map. We'll just inch forward, go north just a little bit to where we cross over Moro Coho Slough, and I'm sure you know this one already, but the highway goes right over the channel itself, so you can see Moro Coho on both sides. That salt pond that I showed before, it doesn't seem to be there anymore. Somebody at some point built up this really big berm. And so the salt pond is now behind that berm there. And I think it's used for what had been the Kaiser refractory. So that's pretty altered. All right, now we're going to go up to the power plant. We're going to take our right onto Dolan Road. From there, you can just get a little glimpse of Elkhorn Slough. So we're looking at the very edge, one of the very the southernmost fingers of Elkhorn Slough here, but you can see the peninsulas of land between those fingers of the slough, those little bolsitas. So I like this image. And now we're going to go to our last stop on our trip. We're going to go up to San Miguel Canyon. And I always like this when I go by this. You can actually see one of the lakes or ponds that was drawn in the Rancho Map. It's well signed. It's Ponderosa. It's labeled right here and here. And if you can look right between the oaks there, you can see the reflection of one of those lakes that's still there today. Okay, well, that is the end of our road trip for today. I hope that I've been able to kind of give you maybe a new perspective on your drives through our watershed, maybe linking some of the past to the world as we see it today, and helping you see what has changed and what hasn't in the last, 150, 200 years.
Awesome. Thank you so much for speaking on this, Andrea. I love going through all of these old maps and like seeing the different styles too, where some of them, were clearly somebody very detail oriented and versus somebody very artistic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening in and tuning in. Thank you, Andrea, for being the speaker for this and also really, helping us compile the history exhibit that we will be sharing hopefully this fall. So next Saturday or next month, first Saturday at 1 p.m. will be our next installment of Weaving Yesterdays, the Historical Ecology series, where we share fun tidbits of the past like this. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.